open. So thank you all, members of the Audit and Risk Committee, other councillors and staff. Thank you for our first Audit and Risk Committee for 2021. We have apologies this morning from Graham Mitchell. I spoke with Graham last night. Graham is a little bit concerned because this is the second meeting in a row that he's had to miss, but he has an appearance at the Select Committee this morning, and he thought that Select Committee probably gazumped Audit and Risk Committee. So I'm not sure that I shared that, but you can't be in two places at once. So Graham did speak to me on a number of the agenda items last night, and he does tender his apology. So can I move an apology from Graham Mitchell? Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Turin. It's been moved and seconded. Do we record all those in favour? Please say aye. Contrary, against. So we will record the apology from Graham Mitchell. We have had no requests for public participation at this meeting. Conflicts of interest. I always sort of pause on this. I think it's important. I have a conflict of interest for today's agenda that I just draw your attention to. It's not really a conflict of interest, but I chair the Audit Advisory Board for PwC. It's a non-management, as the title says. It's an advisory board, but we do have an agenda item and a report today from PwC, so I just draw that attention to you. I do not see it as a conflict. I have no role in PwC. They can either take my advice or not. So just to draw that your attention. Are there any other conflicts that need to be discussed today? There being none, thank you. We have no items of extraordinary business, and so if we can move into agenda item 5, the confirmation of the minutes. So can I ask, are there any corrections, amendments, deletions, adjustments to the minutes? There is none, so can I move that the minutes of the meeting on the 3rd of December 2020 be approved as a true and correct record of that meeting? Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Duncan. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. Carried. Right, our first report at agenda item 6.1, a very important one that we have on a regular basis, health and safety. Who's going to speak to that? Jerry, can I hand that over to you?
Yes, good morning.
Thank you.
Yes, so this quarter pretty quiet on the health and safety front, only one lost time injury. Interestingly though, we did have an incident, or we didn't have an incident, but in the North Island, a 7-year-old child drowned in a pool as a result of loss of spatial awareness. They were, how kids play in the pool, and they were circling around and couldn't work out which way was up and down and actually drowned. So we have, we're advised of that, as all pools are, and we've taken steps to have a bit of an education program for staff and for parents and for people visiting the pool, and training our staff to keep an eye out for that sort of thing. So that's a very sad incident that we hope to avoid in Porirua. I think that was the standout issue in this report. Maybe any questions?
Thank you, Jerry. Just before doing that, it's been rightfully pointed out to me that I should have asked for this report to be tabled. So I would so move. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mayor. So it's been moved and seconded. So thank you, Jerry, for your introduction of it. Can I open this paper for discussion, please? Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, look, I have one question on page 11, 5.1.2, under health and safety compliance. In light of item 8, contractor management, on page 13, how responsible is Council for health and safety for staff when they work from home?
Through the chair, Yes, council retains its responsibility for health and safety for staff when they work at home. And so for those staff that request to work from home, we have a process that we go through. It's a checking process, a checklist to make sure that they can work safely at home with their computer equipment. And that's monitored by a health and safety team.
Councillor Leggett.
Two questions. Just to follow up to that, so are there medium to long term implications of staff working at home in terms of health and safety? I can't for a second imagine that people at home are necessarily going to have the same access to chairs and equipment at home as they do at work. So does that present a potential long term issue in terms of health and safety?
Our current policy provides for people to work up to 2 days from home, so it's not a sort of full-time thing. And we also require that if they're going to be working from home, that they set up their home to allow them to do that safely. So, no use of ironing boards or kitchen table. They've got to have a chair that's suitable for the process and a desk and so forth. And it's expected, at least currently, that they organise and pay for that.
Second question. So, just out of interest, back on page 10 when we've got our injury accidents, do we by any chance, and probably so few it doesn't matter, but do we by chance keep a record of whether individuals are appearing more than once on those injury stats?
I might have to ask my health and safety person on that one, Angela.
We keep a record of all staff who have injuries and accidents at the workplace, and that is something that the managers would then monitor if they notice one of their staff members is, more frequently showing up on those reports.
Thank you, Councillor Leggett. Jerry, can I ask perhaps just to have a look? When I read 7.2, the health and safety training initiatives and the number of attendees in brackets, I found that sort of quite a blunt way of sort of looking at it. And when I looked at sort of the two, bullying and harassment, there were only 6 in each. And then the drug and alcohol had 50 people. I would have thought both of those perhaps would have had the same sort of number. So could we have a look at that and see if there's perhaps a better way of describing the use of those training courses? And, why was it that there were only 6 in each of those sort of bullying and harassment, which is, quite a topical area at the present time. So I don't necessarily need a response today, but just sort of have a look and see if there's a sort of a better way to describe those attendees.
Okay, we'll give that some thought. Thanks.
All right, if there's no further discussion, it's been moved and seconded. We're asked to receive this report. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Our next report is the update on the long-term plan. And again, we're being asked to receive this report and note the progress made on the long-term plan and the associated risks and issues identified. I would move that we receive that report. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Morrell. Moved and seconded. So open for discussion. So like we normally do, if we could have a slight, quick introduction to the paper, and then we'll open it for discussion.
Morena, councillors. So I'll take the report as read, and perhaps by way of update, as we're in the fast moving stage at the moment, where every day something relatively significant is developing as we're down to the wire with preparing all the documents. So the material is going to OAG on the 12th of March. We're working towards that goal, and we're still on track to do that. We have been in conversations with EY around the approach to infrastructure based on its budget significance, and it's probably more appropriate that I hand over to Grant around what the conversation has been, because that's probably the only other change that councillors would be need to be updated on following the last conversation we had with you at our last workshop. Open to questions.
Thank you, Nicola. Just before I ask Grant to comment, if I can ask the Chief Executive.
Just a minor correction. My understanding is the documents are now not going to OAG until the 16th. So it's been a slight delay, and I would point out that at this pointy end of the process, there is a bit of scrabbling going on, and there are some issues around the Wellington Water inputs into our process, and the data and whether it's sufficient for the audit process. So we are working through that in kind of real time. Grant will be able to comment exactly where they're sitting on that, but it's not exactly trouble-free just at the moment, but these things are often a little bit tricky at this point.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Can I ask, so that delay of it going to Audit New Zealand and these issues with Wellington Water, is that likely to delay the finalisation for the public consultation or impact that process?
No, it's the hot audit at the OAG that's been pushed back. So.
Okay, Grant, are you able to comment on this agenda item, please?
Sure, Warren. I mean, I think Wendy's summarised where we're up to pretty well. There's a meeting with the Auditor General tomorrow that will consider two other local authorities who are also relying on the Wellington Water information, and that will be pretty insightful for us in terms of where the Auditor General's sitting, in terms of whether there will be any opinion impacts on the consultation documents for entities that are reliant on the Wellington Water inputs. And I wouldn't like to predict where they're going to land. Wendy's had some engagement with the OAG assistant who looks after local government jointly with Wellington Water earlier this week. I think it's fair to say the Auditor General has a heightened level of expectation for the degree to which condition information is informed with far more precise data than assuming that age is a reasonable proxy for asset condition. And they're also mindful, I guess, that there's a water reform process underway, and that that has sparked their keenness for information to be of a far higher standard than it was 3 years ago.
Thank you, Grant. Any other sort of issues on this long-term plan? Are you sort of in your work sort of tracking to sort of meet the timetable, even though that seems to be moving around a little?
I'm pretty confident, Warren. I guess the point that was passed to me previously, the feedback I gave Wendy the other day was, on balance, I thought the draft of the CD that we were working with was pretty quiet in terms of the increased level of capital expenditure that was forecast, and just wondered whether on balance actually that was something that could be more explicitly dealt with in the document. And I haven't seen the latest update, but I see on the emails it's come through. So I haven't yet seen whether or not there's been some words to kind of beef up the level of discussion on that matter in the CD. So
is it fair to assume, Grant, save the resolution of that matter you're looking, progress is going to be made sort of in terms of the timetable.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption, Warren. And we'll deal with the feedback from the OAG hot review process. Typically that is in two categories: word changes. It's very seldom that the feedback coming out of that process are things that can that result in substantive levels of extra work.
Thank you, Grant. Chief Executive.
We are in the process of making some changes to the consultation document following the discussion I had with Grant, and that councillors will be interested to know that focuses on our renewal spend, because you'll recall in workshop discussions we had basically ring-fenced renewals at around 50% of what Wellington Water was recommending for us. So we have added another consultation item to that document, and basically we're explicitly asking the public now about whether that level is right and whether they would, so you've made a judgment that that's within our affordability limits. So we are just being more explicit about that issue. And it sits pretty well in the discussion and the feedback that we had with you, must have been last week, about beefing up that infrastructure element. So you have all told me that you see this as an infrastructure document, and that this is an infrastructure LTP. So that sits quite well inside that kind of process, in my view. So you councillors as elected members will also get that document. You'll recall we're planning to send that out tomorrow, I think, to you, so you get a look at the draft version. So just wanted to give visibility on that to you as well. So, but that's where we've landed on that issue.
Councillor Morrell.
Just with regarding the draft of policy coming out tomorrow, is it going to be in are we going to get the real paperwork, or are we going to have to rely on Diligent to look at it?
It will come out through Diligent, but if you require a copy, councillor, I'm sure we can provide you with one.
Can we just ask, sorry, if anybody else would like a hard copy? Because we'll do a run if 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Councillor Deegan.
So I'm just slightly confused here around this audit process. Can somebody explain to me about what is actually being questioned from Wellington Water? Is it the efficacy of their data around condition? Because somebody mentioned condition age. And if that's so, we have based the whole asset management plan on that information from Wellington Water. Where the devil does that leave us if there's an issue here?
So, in my view, we have got much better information this LTP than we had the last LTP, and that was a marked improvement on the one before. So we are on a gradual improvement path, but the way Wellington Water have developed their investment profile for the next 10 years for most councils, but 30 for us, they've used different methodology from the one that the Office of the Auditor General had envisaged, and they in my meeting with them, they did veer somewhat between you need asset information about critical assets, like real, actual critical, information, data, and then on all assets. So they were kind of sliding around on that point somewhat, in my view. But the truth of the matter is, and Wellington Water have told you this, is that we do not have all the information, for example, on our pump stations. They will have completed that by June. So by our final LTP, we will have all that information, but we know already, and as does Wellington Water, that we will need to spend money on that. And that is, in Wellington Water's view, and they outlined this to the OAG, that is about where you spend the money within that envelope, not, it's not increasing or decreasing. They think the information to develop the investment profile is good enough. What they're really saying is we will target that more exactly once we get the data from the asset condition surveys. So, and that's probably true for the way they've approached all of it, when they come to, and it's how we approach projects as well, we get better and better at defining how much is needed for a particular thing. So it's a little bit of a battle of methodologies that's going on at the moment. But in my view, the information we have, the condition information is gradually improving over time. It's just that certainly the OAG has chosen a higher bar this time. Not quite sure where the bar is, but we're hoping that that will be reconciled. And as Grant has said, the Audit New Zealand councils are going through a hot review with the OAG tomorrow. So we'll get better insight into exactly how high that bar is and how close we are to it.
Councillor Leggett, yep.
So, two questions. One is, what happens if we lose that battle?
I think I'll leave Grant to answer that because I'm not an auditor.
So through you, Warren, there'll be an opinion impact, I guess. Councillor Leggett, it is the only mechanism the auditor has available. And so the range of options there are a pretty innocuous paragraph which points out the uncertainties in the condition information underlying the financial forecasts, but is not a qualification, or there's a qualification to the opinion.
Okay, that's fine. The second question is, as a result of these things, if it is because we're going out to the public regarding renewals, if the opinion generally is, we should be spending more money on renewals, I mean, I'm happy with the balance we've got now, but if we get better information, that might change. So are we saying that our envelope is not going to change, or are we asking our ratepayers to decide on whether the envelope should expand? Because if we do more renewals and less of other things, we might miss out on some things anyway. And on top of that, there's always the issue of, is there the workforce to actually do the work anyway if we expand the total envelope?
All of those will be inputs to your decision. We're agnostic in the document, as I understand it, on whether it would be a reprioritisation or an increase in the envelope. So we haven't actually made that, it could be either, as you say, it could be either. But there are consequences both ways.
Any further discussion? Important to...
Through the chair, we do have the issue with the cap on the borrowing, so that we at a certain time we cannot, because our borrowing cap is with LGFA is 280% of revenue. So that is an issue that we are constrained with in putting more, because we'd have to debt fund it. And that is noted in the draft wording of the consultation document that is going through the process at the moment.
Sorry, just explain that to me. Debt funded? I think everything's debt funded.
Everything's debt funded, but we have a cap on how much we can borrow.
So how much more have we got? I mean, we did have that discussion. I can't remember. How much more can we borrow in order to expand the envelope before we reach our debt cap?
I'll need to come back with that.
Josh.
Cheers, thank you. Just a quick question in regards to the consultation timeframe. I actually had a question at a residents' association meeting this week just around the length of the consultation, and there was a concern that a 1 month period may not be enough for everyone to engage. And so I was just wondering on that, if an officer could comment on that, and just in terms of the timeframe that we have gone with, how does that compare to other previous LTPs in the past and other councils on average, I guess?
Chief Executive.
We've always done 1 month. In fact, it's always been April, as I recall, so certainly during my time here. If you really wanted to, you could extend it, but we've got a hard end to the process. We have to have had it all signed off and through a number of processes, including hearings, etc., by the end of June. And actually, April's about as far back as we can go. I wouldn't recommend that you add any more time into it. It has always been sufficient. We get the submissions we get. And in fact, it's the first time for a while that I've heard that particular complaint. So, I think it's certainly in line with every other local authority. Sometimes that people add a week on, but they generally they've started earlier than we are. So, 4 weeks is standard, and it's what's required under the legislation.
Cool, thanks. And just as well, in terms of public access to that consultation document, will that be from that first day of the consultation, or will it be publicly available earlier than that first day?
Well, technically, it's available when you consider it, when it goes up on our website and our meeting papers, but actually we're proposing to start consultation the day after you pass it. So it'll be available then.
All right, thank you for that discussion. Really important agenda item over the next few months. Thank you everybody for the hard work on the long-term plan, and thank you, Grant, also for you and your team in being a key part of this. So it's been moved and seconded. We've been asked to receive this report and note the progress. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Right, next agenda item 6.3 on page 19. This is the Risk and Assurance Quarterly Report. We've been asked to receive the report and note the completion of the annual audit plan is on track, and the planning is underway for the 21-22 plan, which will be presented to us in June. So I have pleasure in moving that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Mayor. Moved and seconded. Alison, would you like to introduce briefly the paper, please?
Sure, thank you, Chair. You've pretty much covered it there. Everything is on track. The only thing I draw your attention to is that I have picked up the insurance program, so I'm looking after that, and that's taking up a bit of my time at the moment, and that will be reflected in my plan going forward. But apart from that, happy to take any questions.
Any questions, discussions on the Risk and Assurance Quarterly Report? Councillor Leggett.
Sorry, can I just ask, what on page 25, what's the likely contractor document sign-off date?
No, you're in the next agenda item, Councillor. So you can ask that question in a few moments. Councillor Duncan, are we still on agenda item 6.3? Yeah, great, thanks.
I'm looking at page 21, the time frame for audit engagement, and I see the Datascape controls review moved out to 21-22. This Datascape's starting to look a bit of a dog, actually. I don't know it's quite what Roy sold it to us as.
We've got an agenda item coming up on that, 6.4, so let's drill down under that agenda item. So anything else on the risk and assurance plan? There being none, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary carried. Thank you. Right. Okay, Datascape update. Agenda item 6.4, starting at page 23. We've been asked to receive this report. I'd be happy to move that, seconded by Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ford. And again, who's going to, Alison or Joe, would you give us a few pearls of wisdom to introduce this report, please? Joe.
So this is the update as at the end of January for Datascape. So we're working through with Datacom. We did say that we're looking for contracts to be signed at the 28th of February. That we have pushed that out. The reason being is we want to be very clear on the scope to support the contract and the statement of work, because it comes basically we have a master services agreement with Datacom, and then we have the scope. And the scope specifies in the statement of work what we're going to get and what is the quality and the timing of it. So we have asked for clearer quality dimensions so that we actually fully understand what we are to receive, because the issue is they are building it at the same time. So that hopefully covers off that first question that was asked before. But we are now in the position that we are still looking to put finance and rating in at the 1st of July. But again, there does go through a go-live testing, go-live sign-off, and we're working through, which this document talks about, the scope and the schedule, and that's when the regulatory. This is in addition to what's in this report. We are doing, from a risk perspective, we are doing it through the lens of a user. So we're looking at piece of work, we're looking at the risks of the lens of someone ringing the contact centre and someone ringing the, coming into the front counter, so that the experience, we don't put our customers, our ratepayers, having a bad experience as we manoeuvre from one system to the other, because we will be transiting over a period of time from one to the other. And in relation to the question that got asked about the audit plan, why we are pushing it out, it's pushed out because the go-live date has been pushed out, and because the go-live date was pushed out, that piece of work will happen once we go live.
Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, look, on the issue scope, finance and rating, sorry, that's on page 24. The scope of the finance and rating schedule for 1 July release is fairly well defined, but it excludes budget management, utility, water management and debt management. Can you tell me what it actually includes?
So it does include rating, so it'll include all the revenue coming in. It'll include accounts payable, which is all the payments going out. So we will be getting our money in the door and we will be paying our suppliers. We have, through the debt one, is we've now got that back in, because that was actually the chasing up of outstanding debt, which is non-rate related, which is actually not a big portion. We're working through at the moment on the, so basically we've got all of finance except for that. So what you think of a finance system is there. We have, since this report got written, the budgets will now be loaded into Datascape for the first reporting of 30 October. So we've made movement on that since this report got written. We are looking at the water utilities, which is where people have got water meters. We don't have significant number of water meters, so we are currently working on a workaround. So we will still be invoicing for water meters, and we will be chasing it, water, and we'll be chasing it up. But we are still pushing, which was the workshop we had with Datacom on Tuesday. We are still very much pushing for that to be delivered in the first quarter of the new financial year.
Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, so with the water meters, will that be built with a view to us actually having water meters across the city?
It is built on the basis that a local government product requires other councils have water meters. So what we're not actually, even though we're the pilot for it, this is not a PCC system. It is a system for local government New Zealand, so local government across New Zealand. And of course, there's other councils that if Datacom wish to sell that product into, they must have the ability to do water metering.
Councillor Morrell.
I'm glad I wasn't here when this decision was made, but I'm getting a bit nervous here. I think I heard someone say they're writing the project as we go, having just gone through a software up change in my own company, and they wrote it as we went, and it's been a nightmare. Knowing what we know now, have we made the right decision to go this way? And I probably are too late to turn back, but...
We are definitely too late to turn back. The things we were sold on in the system are still in the system. So we were sold on that customer interface. They're not in that first finance bit, but they do come subsequently. So it's still a very good system. But they are, and we got a price differential because we're the first one in. Always carries risk, you're right. It was a calculated risk, and we're paying the price in terms of time. So that's what we're actually not paying any more money. So yes, it's still got some risks in it because we're supporting an old system that is, we're running Tech 1 for our finance. So there's still some risk in that, but those gaps are closing every day, and Jo's doing a great job. She's kind of picked it up by the scruff of its neck and making it work. So and Datacom are very motivated, so that's always helpful.
Thank you, Chief Executive. It's important that this remains on our agenda at each of the Audit and Risk Committees. It's a major project for Council. There, as you've heard, certainly some risks associated with any major IT project, as we all know. But I certainly sense from where I sit that senior management have grabbed this by the scruff of the neck and are keeping a very close eye on it. And holding the torch appropriately to Datacom on this. But let's keep it on our agenda, and thank you for this report. Any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Right, 6.5 is a Treasury update. We've been asked to receive this report. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Mayor. It's been moved and seconded. Who's going to speak briefly to this? Zach, are you going to do that? Thank you very much. Treat us gently. There's some sort of technology in here that's probably new to many of us. So, thank you, Zach.
Through you, Chair. So this is our first time coming to Audit and Risk. So in December 2020, we did our 9th update of the Investment and Liability Management Policy, which is effectively our Treasury function. We looked at updating some of the delegations, operational process, and some of the actual management policy. One of the outcomes with that is that we would report to Audit and Risk Committee quarterly, just to show how the Treasury function is tracking. So the report in front of you is at the 31st of December 2020. So with our Treasury function within Council, we get PwC in as an independent advisor who advises us on all of our Treasury management processes, our debt drawdowns, and our investments. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. It's open for discussion. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thanks for this paper copy.
That's all right.
Can you explain that graph to me? There's no legend with it or anything. I don't know what the hell it means. Yeah.
Always.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it. I can bring back the specifics next time I come back. I'd have to get the specifics. It doesn't have the legend on there. I do apologise. So the paper in front of you is from the PwC Power BI tool, and it is something we are looking to update, so it actually is more practical. This is our first cut at it, so I apologise for that.
No further discussion. Zach, I commend you for using external assistance in this area. It's a very sort of complicated area. I think sort of in the future with some of these reports, if we can sort of have a paper explaining some of them, could be sort of helpful. But obviously it's a tool that's sort of used throughout the community, and so it's good that we have access to that. So, all right, it's Councillor Leggett.
Sorry, yeah, these things are difficult to interpret, and I just wondered whether, given the 3 months that have gone by, or 2 months, whether there are any issues that have come up in the meantime that we should be concerned about, particularly moving into our LTP?
Through you, Chair. So with our Treasury management policy, it's built on the approach of being financially prudent. So all the indicators are that we need to notify if there's any element of risk. So everything as it currently sits is acceptable within the policy limits. Most of the ones around debt, for instance, around the LTP, were significantly lower currently than our maximum cap. So as it still stands to date, there's no risk around the Treasury management function.
Thank you. No further discussion. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary carried. Agenda item 6.6, starting on page 29, the audit plan. We've been asked to receive the report and confirm the acceptance of the proposed audit plan. So I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Moved and seconded. Grant, are you sort of happy to briefly introduce this document to us?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Warren. So I'll speak very briefly to page 32 of the papers, which is at the summary of the plan. And the 6 areas of focus should look familiar to members who have been on the committee for some time, because they are pretty consistent with areas of focus that have been there in previous years. However, part of the conversation we had earlier in respect of the LTP also is relevant to the work we will do in respect of the 30 June 2021 financial statement audit. So that heightened level of expectation the Auditor General is seeking to bring to bear across the local government audits, looking for alignment between service performance reporting, the condition information that is used to inform asset valuations is something that features in his instructions to us for this balance date. And unsurprisingly, that focus is particularly relevant in respect of water assets again. So that's while we've always looked at the valuation of infrastructure asset, that alignment between the quality of council's service performance measures, the degree of risk that is perceived to be present within those assets as a result of their age and condition, is that alignment is something that's new and evolving. Other than that, the other thing I was going to make, this will be my final year as the appointed auditor for Porirua City Council, and I will be succeeded following signing of the June 21 opinion by David Borry, one of my colleague partners in the Wellington office, who has really strong local government experience. And so David will shadow me through the conclusion of the 21 audit process to make sure there's a smooth transition. But really, the test for us today is to get feedback from members of the committee to make sure that we've calibrated our intended areas of focus in those aspects of the financial statements and service performance reporting where councillors perceive there to be risk or opportunity for judgment estimate bias. So with that, Warren, I'm very happy to respond to any feedback or questions.
Thank you, Grant. Open for discussion. Councillor Morrell.
I looked at this report. I was actually looking. I see your audit fee. I was actually looking for a discount in there for the incorrect information. This is a bit tongue in cheek about the wage subsidy, but I remember Grant asking you at this at the audit and risk that were we on solid ground, and the advice from your company was yes, we were on solid ground, and it turned out that we were not. I was just. How did we get that wrong?
Councillor Morrell, just on that, I haven't seen any suggestion that you weren't satisfied you met the criteria that was published that made you eligible for the wage subsidy. And am I incorrect?
But we were forced to pay it back because we got it wrong.
Well, you chose to refund it. That is correct.
I don't quite. We chose to because I thought we chose to because we were forced to, because the calculation was incorrect in the way that we arrived at arriving at our ability to claim it.
I may intervene at this point. So we used a particular methodology which was in line with the way we run our accounts, and that we certainly fell into we met the criteria that government had, rather loose criteria, I might add, that they had put up on the wage subsidy. When the calculation, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, was done, the methodology they prefer, we came just under it we had to have lost revenue, I think, of 40%, and we came in under the alternative at something like 38%. 28 against 30, sorry, had my numbers wrong. So actually we were pretty close to meeting it in that case, but we did not meet it. So actually they did an audit, we pay it back, we always do the right thing, so that's what we do. So yes, we thought we were eligible, so it's not that we were trying to twist the facts or anything. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Duncan.
Mine's on a similar topic with the audit fee. Look, it's 207,000, and I recall last time we were about 160,000 on this. Am I right with that? That's a 20% increase. So I'm curious, when we get to page 39, sector and focus areas, and we look at the planned audit approach, bullet point 5 says you will reconfirm Council's understanding of the procurement policy, in particular how Council deals with value for money assessment. In light of the 20% increase in cost to Council, does EY check the value for money, or do we get a peer review?
Well, the Auditor General performs a peer review process across all audit fees across public sector entities. So I would encourage Council to reach out to Murray Powell at the Auditor General's office who performs that function, because Murray has done that in respect of every public entity that we audit on behalf of the Auditor General. And if that information is useful to get you comfortable with the fees that have been agreed, I'd suggest that Joe or one of the management team can make that approach. That approach was made last time we went through a fee negotiation with Council, so Roy will hold that information that was received at that time. Very happy that our fees are in line with what you'd get or what you'd observe across the local government sector.
Grant, can I try and make a helpful suggestion on this topic of fees? My my reading of it is the increase this year over last year is predominantly because you were planning on doing quite a significant amount of work on the transfer to Datascape. That's not going to happen this year. That's going to happen in the following year. And I did notice that your fee estimate in that 3-year renegotiation for next year, in fact, comes down on this 207,000 level. So I wonder whether the fee for this coming year could be at what you were working with for next year, and next year could be at the 207 because, you know, the work for the Datascape transfer has been delayed out a year.
Yeah, you're right, Warren. On page 53 of the papers, the work related to Datascape migration is identified as an item that will move based on timing of that work, and we're budgeted 120 hours, I think, from memory for that work.
So, you know, perhaps just have a look at that in light of knowing that that work's not going to happen in this current financial year, and the possible impact on the fee and that may placate the discussion on the increase this year. Councillor Duncan.
It's a different topic. It's on page 41, assessment of internal controls environment. Controls reliance, line 6, midway along. We've set out a table to the right, but you haven't. Is there a table, or is it the table that comes later on in the paragraph?
Shabazz, you've got your paper copy there. Could you help me with the reference?
It is that table down the bottom there, is it? I couldn't make sense of the table anyway, so I've...
Yeah, it's at the bottom. Yeah. Apologies, I can, I can rectify the, thank you.
Can I ask one last question?
Certainly, Councillor.
Yeah, at the very end you have a disclaimer, and it says the information contained in this communication does not constitute advice and should not be relied on.
Sorry, is there a question, Councillor Duncan?
Sorry. I'm just saying on page 50, your last paragraph, you have a disclaimer that says the information contained in the communication does not constitute advice and should not be relied on. Is that true?
Well, it is in that we're showing where we intend to place our audit focus. You can absolutely rely on the opinion we issue at the conclusion of our work, but this is not intended to be advice to council as to where the risks in your organisation are, etc. This is our perception of those, but it's not intended to step into your shoes. We cannot advise you on those matters. That would be a breach of our independence rules.
Grant, I've got one comment or question in relation to the areas of emphasis in your plan. There appeared to me to be a sort of level of sameness there, which is not necessarily a negative comment. I think, you know, those are the areas that the council face and you need to audit. But I think following our earlier discussion with the Datascape project, are you comfortable as enough audit work? And I know that the financial implications of that project at the current time are relatively small in terms of the impact on the balance sheet at this stage. But you know, with the risk that was talked about in the discussion on the earlier agenda item, are you comfortable that your audit is responding to that discussion?
Well, I'd be really interested, Warren, in which risks you see in the project might sheet home to either service performance reporting or the financial statements. So while, as you're aware, we're always interested in understanding the broader risk environment, in order to do the audit within the constrained fee, as Councillor Duncan's just pointed out. We really need to hone our energies around those items that are going to manifest in either June 21 impacts on service performance reporting or the financial statements, or have the potential to, in out years, to do that. And at this stage, I'm confident that keeping regular touch and understanding when that data migration is going to occur and being very involved in that is the best focus for us. But if there are other aspects of that project that particularly concern members in respect of the statements to which our opinion is going to be attached, either this year or in out years, we'd be very interested in understanding what those concerns were so that we can respond appropriately.
Thank you, Grant, for that. I think Council always appreciates your ability to sort of make comments on these matters. You see a lot of major IT projects, and you sort of understand, that they are risky, and you see things that go right and you see things that go wrong. And I'm sure Council sort of appreciates you sort of just keeping a watching brief
Sure.
on this, and certainly comments into discussions at these meetings or council meetings, I'm sure would be well received.
Okay.
That was the basis, and which I was sort of making that comment or asking that question.
Okay.
Any further discussion on the audit plan? We've been asked to receive the report and confirm acceptance of the proposed audit plan, based on you sort of looking at some of the comments that were made in the discussion here today, Grant. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Agenda item 6.7, the Ombudsman's review of the Local Government Official Information and Meeting Act. We have a paper here which requires us to receive the report. So I'll be happy to move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Duncan. It's been moved and seconded. Who's going to address that? Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Chief Executive.
So councillors will recall that the Ombudsman does these reviews. They do about 3 or 4 each year. We were lucky enough to be chosen, apparently randomly. I'm overall pretty pleased with the report. There are kind of a hierarchy that the Ombudsman comes out with in his report. Recommendations are something you try not to get. So we achieved that. We got no recommendations because they carry rather more weight than the suggested areas for improvement. We got quite a few of those though. So the document that has just been passed around is the response that we gave back to the Ombudsman's office. It's been updated actually, so we've made some further improvements. So we have made quite a lot of progress, so even the live streaming of these meetings is one of the areas of improvement they had noted. And as you know, we are working through still a couple of technical issues, I gather, around councillors getting corporate email addresses. There was some concern the Ombudsman raised with me about the depth of our knowledge, so we are beefing up our training internally, and we are about to set up a part-time but a position to focus on this area and the Privacy Act. So the number of improvements we've made already, they do come back and monitor where, what progress you've made. But overall, I was reasonably happy. Our timeliness wasn't that great. That was one of the issues that came up. but we have gone back and looked at, so they did that at a point in time. We've had a full year report since then, and I can't remember we've improved anyway. And this calendar year, we're sitting at 99% on time. So long may that continue. There are sometimes that we do get slippage on those issues, but generally not by a long period. We sometimes miss the statutory period by a day or so, but still a miss. So we are tightening that up internally, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Certainly my take on this was sort of an excellent outcome. It was a very detailed report, and if you looked at the executive summary, I think saved that timing issue that you've drawn attention to, the general tenor of this exercise was positive. So, comments, questions on this? Councillor Morrell.
Oh, just two things. I know just today, because we live streamed and Zoomed and Jack wasn't here, have we got a backup plan for future if Jack suddenly didn't arrive? That was one question.
That's right. We certainly, we've had a moment of reflection on that already, and we will be broadening our skill base on that matter.
That was a tongue-in-cheek question, really. I knew you would. Just the other one is around the local government official information, those annoying, although no, I shouldn't say that, they're not annoying. They are our ratepayers' right to ask questions, and I know you have a view that we should give them as much information as possible. But for those who are persistent in writing to us on a regular basis, when it becomes a point that we do decide then to A, either charge them for some of these long-winded ones, or B, we classify them as a, what's the classification? A pain in the a nuisance value?
A nuisance fee.
So there's a couple of questions in there. So we've had legal advice because we've certainly, we've got what we're inclined to call colloquially frequent flyers in that space. And they make up quite a percentage of our overall requests. The advice is, and it makes sense, is that as long as people are asking different questions or digging into things, you've got no rights to say go away. If they're asking the same question and trying to get a different answer, that's when you can say, actually, you're, the nuisance value, I can't remember the term in the Act, but you can refuse to engage beyond a certain point. But it's quite a high bar, and so we take that advice and do what we can. So typically the people who often ask questions, they do have different questions that they're asking. So just because they frequently ask questions doesn't mean that you can turn them off because it's annoying, if you like. So yes, there is the ability to charge, and we have charged actually, because sometimes, and generally not those people, it can be somebody else. Often lawyers ask for the correspondence going back several years, and we simply don't have the resource to do that. So we do charge in those kind of circumstances. We do try and make it infrequent, and we are inclined to use it as an opportunity to go back and say, what are you really looking for? Because that's going to be much less burdensome on the organisation than a a kind of fishing expedition where they're looking for something and they think it'll be within several years worth of documents in the system. So those are the ones we really struggle with and try to refine back to a single request, basically.
supplementary question then. Just regarding the total cost of the whole process, is there any way that we could publicly tell people, not individuals, but this past month we have spent X number of dollars on replying to questions, or the last 3 months we have had X number of dollars? Because I think the public would be quite, if they knew about the sort of amount. I just think it's a good idea to try and get it out there, just what people they put us through.
To be honest, I think the Ombudsman might take a slightly dim view on that. I think they would see it as us trying to put barriers up to people requesting information. So we have, on one occasion that I recall, I was asked to cost up. I got a Local Government Official Information Meetings Act request to cost up the estimated time for one of those requesters, and we did do an estimate on that, and as I recall, it did get some social media outing. So they are estimates. We don't calculate, we don't have a time recording system within the council of staff time, and that is typically what the cost is to go and fish things out.
Thank you, Councillor Morrell. Mayor.
So do we keep a list of our frequent flyers so we know, not for the general public's view, how many people are requesting once a year, whether one person is doing 30 requests or obviously 20 requests? Do we keep a sort of list? I know anyone can OIA that as that has been done before, but we do have obviously
we certainly have all the data. We don't run it like that, so we don't kind of tote it up every time somebody asks puts a request in, but we get, Moana will tell me, about 100. You better tell me the number. I won't guess it.
Through the chair. So from 1st of July last year to date, we've had 164. And the previous year, at the same time frame, we had 179, and the year before that, 138. So it does seem to be creeping up slightly.
Councillor Leggett.
Sorry, just one observation, everybody, and I think the point was made well about while my fingers itch about costs and all the rest of it, I think I have to say that this is the price we pay for transparency and democracy, so we should not forget that.
Thank you, Councillor Leggett. Any further discussion? And Councillor Turin.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just around the recommendation in the report of having more dedicated, specialised Lagoima responses, I guess, from people who are specifically just doing that, and the response from the council will review and make changes as required. And I'm just wondering if there's been any progress there, or if we have any updates around what we're actually looking to change specifically to have a more specialist focus.
So at the moment, it's run out of my office, and it's fitted in around other correspondence and other things. They thought that was too centralised. I suppose I'm always a bit chary about external agencies making recommendations about my staffing levels. I think that's not their job. So while we have been quite cautious in our words there, we have actually only in the last day or so I have created a new position, so that extends it. So interestingly, the Ombudsman's review occurred just when somebody in my office had left, and so the coordination point, that position was vacant, and they're really commenting on that period. So now we will have basically two positions that have one that has primary responsibility and one that has some backup. So yes, we will have that. But in fact, the drafting goes into the into the organisation, because the requests can reside anywhere in any function. So the initial drafting goes on in, somewhere, whether it's in transport or in parks or somewhere, and it's actually the management of the system and sometimes the refining of the response, particularly if it involves more than one question that spans organisationally. So it's a coordination point and quality assurance point, and timeliness check on, to make sure. So, yes, we are making changes in that area.
And just supplementary to that, I can't remember which page it was on, but there was a concern raised around how when there's a major influx, we have to drop everything and sort of focus specifically on that. And so I guess I'm just interested in our vulnerability in that space. If we are finding that we're having to actively drop other work and delay things in order to respond to these big influxes, what sort of processes we have in place or are looking to put in place to make sure that, particularly where there are important deadlines and things have to be turned around, that we aren't sort of left struggling and unable to cope.
That we do have a scale problem in this organisation. We are too small, and there's often only one person will know the answer to a question or will be able to readily draft a response. So, for example, during the Plymouth floods, we got a flood of requests out of that. They all, a number of them have to go to Wellington Water, a number of them we can do ourselves. It does take people off the business of responding to the issue, but there's no real answer to that. We're not going to staff up to, just in case we get a flood or a something. So we just manage as best we can. So typically the EAs in the organisation are pretty critical for this function, because they do a lot of the initial data gathering, and so that they're pretty important. But sometimes it's just the way it is. So it hasn't been a huge issue. Something like the floods is a moment, but it goes pretty quickly. There's a moment where not only are we trying to respond, but we're trying to, there's public outrage, and you're trying to do both. But they don't come that frequently, and fortunately in our organisational sort of life.
And just my last question on that then, I guess, is if we noted that the one area where we really wanted to improve from this had been the number of misses that we'd had, and often, I think you were saying before, it was often just by a day or two. And I guess my question is, do you see the misses that we're having as almost being the natural consequence of that size issue, that even though we've identified the fact that it's a problem just because of the limited number of staff and expertise that we may have, that something like that may just be unavoidable, and that means we just have to be good and proactive in our comms around where there may be delays?
No, I don't see it as an inevitable consequence. Actually, I think, to be frank, that in some parts of the organisation, it's not seen as a high priority. We've got quite a broad range of staff, and actually some of them can't quite understand why they're taken off their day job to answer a request, because actually their day job is, what they perceive as their real job. So that's an issue, the management issue, and that's a reminder and training issue. It goes into the culture of your organisation. So no, I don't think that prevents us meeting our timeliness. And given that we've improved significantly over time, I don't think we could argue that at all.
Councillor Morrell.
Just a question which suddenly thought about. When because this meeting is live stream, or any of our meetings are now live stream, what is the councillors individually liable for if someone is inadvertently says something about something? Can somebody who is watching the program or watching the meeting make a case or a claim against a particular councillor or a council if we discuss a topic? Just what exposure do we have in that sort of risk area?
I would, of course they could, but I would estimate that probably the main issues you've got are around perceived predetermined views. So if you make statements because that risk always existed, but you're right, if the audience grows because of video streaming, actually your viewers, who you don't know who they are, may say Councillor X made a bold statement and has a predetermined view on a particular issue, and therefore should be precluded from the discussion. So we could end up in a bit of a public dispute with a member of the public on that issue. If you make defamatory comments, well, you'll be liable for those yourselves, but those risks exist already, but they are somewhat heightened by the fact that you've got a viewership that you don't know who it is, and we've got people who may find this very exciting and watching every council meeting.
Our frequent flyers.
Thank you. Excellent discussion. An important piece of external work that was done on the council. Just to let you know that I've asked the officers to come back at our December meeting and update this table that we received today, just to make sure that the work is progressing to pick up those calls for action from this review. So it's been moved and seconded. We're asked to receive this report. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Audit and Risk Committee members, I would now like to move that we go into a public excluded session and also grant Taylor and his team permission to remain at that meeting. So I'd move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Mayor. It's been moved and seconded. So we need to just wait a wee while